Well, we put it off as long as possible, but we're going to run through the most recent all petite wrestling program for May the 12th on TNT. I put off watching it as long as I could, but I'm not going to be brutal today because at this point, I'm just kind of shaking my head. The opening match, and people were just up in arms over what I said about poor old Yuji Nagata last week or whenever. Oh my God, he's a Japanese legend. Yes, I'm aware of that. My comment was, who in this day and age in 2021 in the United States of America knows who the fuck Yuji Nagata is? A very small segment of people who were paying real close attention to WCW apparently 25 years ago because the announcers made sure to mention that it had been 23 years since he'd been on TNT. So that gave the modern fan a clue to his age. Him being a generic-looking 50-something-year-old Japanese guy probably gave him a bigger clue. And when Moxley, of all people, treated him like he was a Fabergé egg, that may have given him another clue. I'm not saying he's not a legend in Japan. I'm saying I don't know if a lot of Japanese people might not know who fucking Dutch Mantel is either. But, Brian, help me articulate to the folks who just don't want to listen why I said, why do you just advertise this match like it's a major event? I can understand even if you want to make the New Japan people happy, but expecting people to give a fuck about this and especially to open the show with it. I know they're not opposed anymore, but they're opposed by something on another channel.
The other thing, too, is it's a belt that Moxley apparently has that he wears to the ring sometimes.
Yes.
It's not like it's a belt that he defends every week or you hear about. This is the second time that it's popped up. First time it was Kenta. Now it's Yuji Nagata. But other than that, we've never heard anything about this belt on AEW TV ever.
Well, we know that Tony Khan will spend money for music. Wild Thing. You make my heart sing. So.
Who wrote that song?
The Trogs.
No, they sang the song.
Oh, they sang. Who wrote the song? I see what you're saying. This is a trivia question that I am ashamed that I don't know the answer to.
Chip Taylor.
Now I know why I don't. Who?
You don't know who Chip Taylor is?
Who the fuck was Chip Taylor?
Well, he is. I think he's still alive. He was a songwriter, or he is a songwriter. And he wrote Wild Thing. And he also has a very famous brother. And he wrote other famous songs, which I can look up right now.
Who's the famous brother?
Jon Voight.
Wait a minute. Jon Voight's brother is Chip Taylor, who wrote Wild Thing for the Trogs.
That's correct. He didn't write it for the Trogs. The Trogs.
Well, he wrote it, and then the Trogs said, okay, but wait a minute now. He can't still be alive. Wild Thing, what, 1963?
No, it was after that. But
not much.
It was probably 65, but he was born in...
goddamn, 2 years.
Well, it's not 63.
What was this guy, child prodigy? He'd be 95.
He's 81. He was born in 1940.
16. All right. I didn't carry the 2. Anyway, so the Wild Thing music was the best part of the match.
He also wrote Angel of the Morning.
Merrily Rush? Just call me Angel of the Morning? A very provocative top 40 hit about premarital sex? What is he, some kind of prevert? Anyway, speaking of preverts.
Can I just say, this is one of the things that Tony Khan's been doing that I actually think is good. I mean, we could talk about the choices, but the idea that he's willing to license music.
Yes, I
commercial
just
music.
Last week or on one of the shows, we were talking about Jim Johnston. Should he be in the WWE Hall of Fame? As he's a great guy and did good music as it goes, but I liked when wrestling was under the radar and you could just play music because everybody knows those songs and it gives the vibe. It's not just something written for you by, and you don't know who the artist is. That doesn't make you look very important. Anyway.
I don't think it works with Moxley, though. Like, even if you wanted Wild Thing, like the version from Major League, they used the Joan Jett version, I believe, which is more, not that I like that better than the Troggs version, expensive. But it's better for getting like a crowd reaction. Now it's Moxley coming out to a song from 1965.
But it's cheaper. And then you know, there's the
MJF's going to come out next week to Take the A Train.
All right, anyway, but as I mentioned, the music was the best part of it. Brian, you know Japanese wrestling better than I do, especially more modern Japanese wrestling, and you're tuned into many of the fans of Japanese wrestling over the last 20, 25, 30 years. I can understand if a Japanese fan is watching Yuji Nagata say, oh, I get to see this guy. It was a personal appearance in tights. And for much the same reason that Steve Austin, I've mentioned, when he was the most over guy in the business, he stomped a mud hole in a guy and it looked like shit, but nobody saw it because he's Steve fucking Austin. But if this guy is still wrestling in Japan like this, I assume the same thing is going. To the Japanese fans, he's a legend. We're not seeing it. It's him. But for an American fan such as myself that hadn't seen this guy in 23 years and then sparingly, this was fucking rotten. Just watch this match in a vacuum. Don't say it's Jon Moxley. Don't say it's Yuji Nagata. Don't say it's for the New Japan US title. Just say this was a match between two guys. And what part of this match was any fucking good whatsoever? That's a question I'm asking you.
I didn't like the match. It reminded me, it's not as bad, but it reminded me of the last match I saw with Tenryu versus Okada, best wrestler in the world. Again, not as bad, but Tenryu couldn't stand up, and, you know, he was doing his stuff because it was clear that he was being allowed to do his stuff in the ring. It wasn't an actual competitive match. It wasn't to that level, but I haven't watched Yuji Nagata in years. To be honest, even when he was coming up, I was more of an All Japan fan than a New Japan fan. But I'll take their word that he's a legend, but whatever he was doing there was wrestling in slow motion. And I feel bad saying it. But especially some of those kicks, or high legs, boots, I guess, you know, where he lifted a leg up. They looked horrible, I thought.
He moves like Bull Curry when Bull Curry was 65 years old. And at the bell, they started with the phony looking forearms that nobody sold. I defy anybody. Go back and watch this after what I'm about to say, and then tell me that I am not telling the truth. They started with the phony forearm exchange that nobody draws back, and even if they're making contact, probably some of them may have been stiff. It just didn't look like it, and nobody was selling them anyway. Then Nagata gets on his knees and Moxley kicks him and he asks him to do more. So Moxley kicks him again, but the pace is glacial. They're underwater. Then Moxley stood there and let Nagata kick him. At one point, Nagata had Moxley in the corner and went to shoot him buckle to buckle and just grabbed his arm and jerked and didn't take a step. And Moxley ran 100 miles an hour. It was the ultimate Vader whip. That used to be the thing with Leon. The Vader whip, when he'd just grab you and just jerk your arm and never even go with it. But he was 400 pounds. Then Moxley kneels there and asks Nagata to kick him. And then they exchanged the bullshit forearms again. And then that's when I wrote Moxley German suplexed him like he was a Fabergé egg. He almost landed Nagata's ass on his own face by taking him over so easy. One decent bump Nagata took, Moxley hit him with that lariat. But then Moxley goes the top, Nagata gets him and barely throws him off the top. They do more phony forearms. Nagata enziguris him, looks like he slipped and fell backwards and accidentally kicked Moxley in the side of the head. And somehow, in the middle of this slow motion match, Moxley got his eye hard weighed and started bleeding from the eye. Maybe it was a bootlace. I don't know what it was. Nothing else looked dangerous. because all her strikes still looked like shit. And then for the finish, it was the fake Muay Thai knees that Moxley does, where he grabs the guy's head and pulls his head in and just lifts his legs in the vicinity of the guy's face, but never comes in contact. And then the announcers didn't even realize it was his finish until he'd already hit it, because they thought it was just a regular double arm suplex, but he turned Nagata, rightfully so. The guy's 50-something years old. His body has to be broken to shit from wrestling in Japan all those years, but he just picked him up, turned him over. That they called it as Moxley's finish, even though he didn't DDT him. 1, 2, 3. If Moxley is a Japanese wrestling fan, which he is, I'm sure it was a pleasure and a privilege for him to be in the ring with Yuji Nagata from New Japan. And if anybody is a really hardcore Japanese wrestling fan that likes the deep cuts, then I'm sure they were glad to see Yuji Nagata on television. But this was an awful wrestling match. And for the average person in the United States of America, they're like, why the fuck is Moxley wrestling somebody's Japanese grandfather? And I was worried for the guy. It looked like he was going to fucking break. He looks in great cosmetic shape, but you can tell he can't move at all. So, hey, any closing thoughts on that one?
Not really. Beyond the match, because I kind of made all my comments about that. Like I said, I like Tony Khan licensing music. I don't know about the Trogs version of Wild Thing being... Like, if you said, like, pick a song from Moxley,
you know what?
That wouldn't be, like, top 100 of the songs I would have picked.
What, Onita, was it Joan Jett?
I think it was the Joan Jett version, too, because that was the one from Major League. It's better for, like, a stadium or a large group of people to sing along and yell along to.
But I think Onita used that also, because you mentioned Major League, and I'm sure that's where they're going for, because now that their exploding popcorn fart match got people so pissed off, they even the AEW fans were up in arms about it. Onita is starting his own new exploding promotion, so he could have popcorn farts too. Except he'll probably really blow somebody up.
And how about the fans who used to complain about when you used, like, older music in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, music from the 70s and 1993. He's licensed the Trogs from 1965, Tarzan Boy by Baltimora from, 1986? And the Pixies from the 80s, too, so.
Wait a minute, hold on. Just even, let's take 1965 out of the equation, because that's 56 years ago. Let's just go with the 35 years. That would have been like me using music from the late 50s in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Anyway,
just imagine.
Okay, yeah.
Some Carl Perkins while you introduce the Mongolian Stomper.
Hey, don't step on these blue suede shoes, motherfucker. Anyway,